Princess Lirelei of the ethereal court had memorized every protocol, every diplomatic courtesy, every possible scenario that her tutors could imagine. She had prepared for months to meet representatives from dozens of species as part of the Grand Alliance negotiations. She had studied the behavioral patterns of the crystalline Zephyrians, practiced the complex greeting rituals of the amphibious Kellery, and learned 17 different forms of respectful acknowledgement for beings who communicated through electromagnetic fields. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the moment when Sergeant David Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force walked into the reception chamber. Lirelei's luminescent skin, normally a calm silver blue that reflected her Etherian heritage, began flickering through colors she couldn't control. Her breathing apparatus' delicate gill-like slits along her elongated neck fluttered rapidly as she fought to maintain the serene composure expected of Etherian royalty. The human was impossible. Every report she'd read about the so-called Deathworlders had described them as brutal, primitive creatures who had somehow clawed their way off a hellish planet through sheer violence. The intelligence briefings spoke of beings who lived such short, violent lives that they had developed a reckless disregard for their own survival. Monsters from a world of constant death. The man standing before her was nothing like those reports. Sergeant Chen moved with a fluid grace that reminded her of the apex predators in her father's royal menagerie. But there was something else: a careful control, a conscious gentleness in how he positioned himself. He was tall by Etherian standards, but not threateningly so. His dark hair was cropped short in military fashion, and his uniform was impeccably maintained. But it was his eyes that undid her carefully practiced composure. They were kind. "Your Highness," Chen said, offering a bow that was somehow both respectful and natural. "I'm honored to meet you. I'm Sergeant David Chen, representing the Human Alliance in these negotiations." Lirelei's translator implant conveyed not just his words, but the underlying emotional resonance. There was genuine respect in his voice, tinged with what her empathic abilities recognized as nervous excitement, not predatory anticipation, but the anxiety of someone genuinely worried about making a good impression. "Sergeant Chen," she managed, her voice modulator struggling to maintain its usual melodic tones as her emotional state fluctuated. "Welcome to the Celestial Station. I trust your journey was acceptable." A slight smile played at the corner of his mouth. "It was my first time in deep space, actually. The view of your homeworld from orbit was breathtaking. The aurora patterns around your twin moons, I've never seen anything like it." Lirelei's skin flashed a brief, brilliant gold, the Etherian equivalent of a blush. She hadn't expected a human soldier to notice, much less appreciate, the natural beauty of her world. According to the briefings, humans were too focused on resource extraction and territorial expansion to care about aesthetics. You found it beautiful?" she asked, her composure slipping further. "Beautiful doesn't even begin to cover it," Chen said, and there was nothing but sincerity in his voice. "I spent 3 hours just watching the light dance across the cloud formations. It reminded me of the northern lights back on Earth, but elevated. More elegant." The princess found herself staring at him, trying to reconcile this thoughtful, articulate man with everything she'd been told about humans. Her skin was now cycling through a spectrum of colors that would have scandalized her etiquette instructors: curiosity purple, mixing with confusion orange, and something dangerously close to attraction crimson. "Are you feeling well, Your Highness?" Chen asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Your skin patterns seem agitated. Should I call for medical assistance?" The fact that he'd noticed her distress and that his first instinct was care, rather than advantage, sent another wave of color across her skin. I'm fine, Sergeant. It's just that you're not what I expected." "In what way?" Lirelei realized she was in dangerous diplomatic territory. How could she explain that she'd expected a savage, only to find herself facing someone whose presence made her feel things she'd never experienced before. The reports described humans as aggressive, violent, concerned only with conflict and conquest. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. I suppose that's not entirely wrong. We do come from a harsh world, and we've had to fight for everything we've achieved. But, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Just because we're capable of violence doesn't mean that's all we are. I joined the military to protect people, not to hurt them. And being capable of war doesn't mean we don't value peace. You speak of protecting people, Lirelei said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you mean just humans, or, I mean people, Chen said simply. Sentient beings who deserve to live their lives free from fear. Human, Etherian, Zephyrian, it doesn't matter to me. Life is precious, regardless of what form it takes. The princess felt something inside her chest, something that had been carefully controlled and regulated her entire life, suddenly break free. Her skin flared brilliant white, the Etherian display of overwhelming emotion, before she managed to force it back to a neutral silver. Excuse me, she said, turning away quickly. I need a moment to compose myself. But Chen's gentle voice stopped her. Your Highness, if I've said something wrong. No, she said, not trusting herself to turn around. You've said everything right. That's the problem. She could hear the confusion in his voice. I don't understand. Lirelei took a deep breath and turned back to face him, her skin now displaying the deep blue of absolute honesty. For months, I've been dreading this meeting. I expected to face a monster. Instead, I find myself speaking with perhaps the most honorable being I've ever encountered. It's unsettling. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then softly he said, I was nervous too. Everything I'd heard about Etherian royalty suggested I'd be meeting someone cold, distant, more concerned with protocol than people. Instead, I'm talking to someone whose emotions are literally written across her skin, whose every response shows how deeply she cares about doing the right thing. They stood in silence, looking at each other across the vast gulf of space and species, both realizing that everything they'd been told about each other was wrong. Perhaps, Lirelei said finally, her skin settling into a warm golden hue that spoke of hope and possibility. We should start over. I'm Lirelei. I enjoy art, music, and apparently challenging my own preconceptions. Chen smiled, really smiled this time. I'm David. I like protecting people, exploring new places, and discovering that the universe is far more wonderful than I ever imagined. As they shook hands, a human gesture that Lirelei found surprisingly meaningful, she realized that her struggle to stay calm hadn't been about fear at all. It had been about the terrifying and exhilarating realization that everything she thought she knew about the universe had just changed forever.